It's in the middle of the Tongass National Forest, which is in the largest intact temperate rainforest in the world. The rainforest has about 16.8 million acres in it, and it covers 70% of Southeast Alaska. So it's a big, big rainforest. We get about 100 inches of rain here a year, and about 30 inches of snow, coming to 130 inches of precipitation a year. I always like to put that in feet because you can just imagine it better. 10 to 11 feet, so a basketball hoop. So if you imagine a basketball hoop, that's how much precipitation we get each year. And so it's definitely a wet area, but surprisingly, this is actually our dry season right now, so we're still raining. The rain season's normally in late August into November time, when all the rain comes usually. Well, not all the rain. It's when the majority of the rain, but it definitely still rains about 4 out of the 7 days each week here, even in the dry season. And so we do get a lot of rain. Other than that keeps us pretty temperate as well in comparison to like Anchorage or Fairbanks, where they get a lot colder. We stay pretty temperate. We even stay more temperate than other cities in Southeast Alaska, and that's mainly because we're the only city in Southeast Alaska that has open access to the ocean. The only one that faces out towards the open ocean. And so, because we face out towards the open ocean, and being the only city with that, the Japanese current actually comes up and passes by us and causes us to stay even more temperate. So we in the winters only drop down to the 30s and 40s, and in the summers we get up to the 50s and 60s. With a cold day being in the 20s and a hot day being in the 70s. Like you guys just barely saw that, make sure you keep your eyes out for bald eagles. Tongass National Forest is the most heavily dense area of bald eagles in the world. And I love seeing people come back and tell me they didn't see any bald eagles. I always just say you were closing your eyes then, because we have a lot of them. You'll see plenty. I try to keep my eyes open for them as well for you guys, but you know, I've got to do this weird thing driving. It's crazy. I'm kidding. But yeah, no, keep your eyes open for them. And was that a question that I heard? Or? Oh, there you go. That's awesome. And out to your right, you'll see just the open ocean out there. So kind of cool. That shows that I'm not lying. It is the open ocean. And just to go into the history a little bit here, I always like to point it out just a little bit. The Tlingits were the original tribe here. The Tlingit people were here for about 10,000 years before any Russians got here. And so they were here for a long time, and they were pretty developed. They actually named the city Sitka, meaning the people on the outside of sheep, because they knew their geographical location. They knew they were on the outside of the island, because they were actually trading with Native Americans down in Washington long before Russia ever got here, and they were actually also trading with the U.S. before Russia got here. I like to say the U.S. was giving them everything you can find in a country song, guns and whiskey, and the U.S. was receiving pelts, mainly sea otter pelts, because in a square inch of sea otter pelt there's about 1 million hair follicles. So very dense, very fluffy and warm, and also waterproof, so a lot of people wanted them. And so that was the original people here, and they're here for a long time. They would fish. They actually made their own halibut hooks, so kind of cool. If you want to go to a museum at Centennial Hall, you can see them. They have their own made halibut hooks, kind of cool. But yeah, those are the first people here. I'll kind of skip around the history so I can share some stuff as we're passing it. On your right, you'll see C-Mart. That's one of our 2 grocery stores. And so I like to say that's one of our 2 Costco's, because you can get aisle of Costco brand stuff there. So we're living a nice life. You got Costco. And then other than that, going through here a little bit, just because there's not much to see, I'll show you the Russian history. Russia came in 1799, and they actually originally came for the fur trade. They weren't coming to colonize. And they came for sea otter pelts. And by 1802, the Tlingits felt like they had already broken some of the hunting agreements they had made. So they went and kicked them out. Well, the Russians weren't too happy to be kicked out, so they came back in 1804 and started the Battle of Sitka. The Battle of Sitka lasted 6 days, and by day 4, the Klingons were actually winning. They had injured the main Russian commander. But sadly, that night they had some gun ammo and gunpowder coming across the harbor in a canoe, and out of a malfunction, the gunpowder exploded, and that decided the Battle of Sitka. The Russians ended up winning. The Klingons knew they were going to lose, so they started heading up and over the mountains, and by 6 morning, the Klingons lost, and the Russians overtook Sitka. Well, at that time, Sitka, and they called it New Archangel. And that's when they kind of got a hold of Alaska in 1804. Out on your right, you got one of our 3 live-in harbors. That's a fun fact just because it kind of shows that we do live in a temperate climate here. 8,500 people live here in Sitka. 1,350 of them live in boats. And so a lot of people live in their boats here. And fishing's huge here, and also it's very temperate. They can, it's cheaper.
Wow.
Off on your right, we are established. We got a McDonald's. Built backwards to face the harbor. And then just a fun thing for you, we only have 2 chain restaurants, 1 McDonald's and 1 Subway. Everything else is locally owned. So kind of cool. Coming up through here, I like to point out, out on your right is the old Sitka Airport. It's a float plane airport. They would come up the ramp to get out of the ocean. They would come up that ramp. They'd use the roundabout and turn around, pick people up, drop people off. And then they would use the ramp to go back down to take off again. That little airport was in operation all the way till the mid-1970s. So they used it for a long time. Now it's a skate park, so kids are flying off every which way on their own. No. Coming up through here, you'll see our second 2 of 2 grocery store. That one has 2 aisles of the Costco brand. So we're living the high life. We got 3 aisles, don't you worry. Coming up here, you got Blatchley Middle School on our right. That's Blatchley Middle School. We have 1 high school, Sitka High, 1 alternative high school, which is Pacific High, just to get your GED if you need it. And then also 3 elementary schools. Our last graduating class from Sitka High was 70 students. So this is a small little school. And now kind of going forward into history, Russia had Alaska from Russia had Alaska between 1804 to 1867. So when they had it from 1804 to 1867. So when they came out of the Crimean War against Great Britain, very poor, and they needed money fast. So they called the U.S. and had us buy Alaska for $7.2 million. That .2 comes from this lake on our left. This lake was made by the Russians. It was dredged by the Russians to be an ice business. They would sell ice as far south as San Francisco. They were here 200 years ago, so it froze back then. And so they would sell ice as far south as San Francisco. And then when they were selling Alaska, they originally agreed with America on $7 million. And then they're like, crap, we're losing our ice business. So they upped it to $7.2 million. And $7.2 million, just so you know, is 2 cents an acre for all of Alaska. And so very cheap. That shows how expensive that lake is. If an acre of land's 2 cents and that lake was 200,000, expensive real estate. 144 just came through the roundabout.
Sitka Fire Department. First one.
All right, now that I'm coming up through here, I'll point out that. All right, now I'm coming through. I'll just point out some things. Out on Lincoln Street, down to the right, you'll see the Russian Orthodox Cathedral as I pass by Lincoln Street. Some of you might not be able to see it right now just because you're behind Westmark. But yeah, on your right is Lincoln, is St. Michael's Russian Orthodox Cathedral. Down to the left, you have, down the left, you have a 10-minute walk to get down to the National Park. where the totem poles are, so not too long of a walk. Along this street, you have food, shops, really everything you can think of. You got reindeer hot dogs, Ashbo's has the food truck has really good fish and chips. But yeah, you kind of have everything along Lincoln Street there. I don't know if you're actually seeing the 144 and 57 passengers that have coming in Centennial Hall. Now that I'm coming into Centennial Hall is going to be your main, I like to say like your central hub. It kind of has everything for you. It's got public restrooms, free Wi-Fi, maps, guides, a museum. It has a show going on right now, Russian dancers. You also can get free Wi-Fi in the Sitka Public Library off to our right here. But Centennial Hall is this building up here. This is also where the shuttle buses pick up to take you back to the boat. And so they pick up right where I'll be dropping you off. So if you do need to get back, just come and get on one here. The Eurodam, the last shuttle for the Eurodam is at 3 o'clock. The last shuttle for the Quantum is at 5 o'clock. So if you don't miss those, because if I've learned anything about cruise ships, it's that they really don't care about you once you've paid them. They will leave you. So Quantum, one more time, is 5 o'clock. Eurodam is 3 o'clock. You got private vendors out here that'll sell you tours and stuff. But other than that, enjoy Sitka for me and try to stay dry.
Sorry na lang ta.
What's the what? I think the Raptor Center is amazing. I think the National Park is amazing. It just shows you the beauty of Alaska.
The beauty of Alaska. Lahin na lang siya. So manaog lang ng wheelchair. Wala pa ikaw. Memory videos. Wow.